Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 182 of Rush Roundtable. This episode is all about what we're calling forgotten Alex Lifeson Solos. So let me explain what that means. We, as Rush fans and hardcore Rush fans, probably aren't forgetting much of anything, right? But this is really to kind of draw eyes back onto some solos that are undervalued or underappreciated, or solos that aren't necessarily in the limelight. Songs like Limelight. I hope nobody puts Limelight on their list, because that is a heck of a solo. But it's basically to kind of draw some cross that one off. It's basically to kind of draw eyes and ears back to some of Alex's solos that we love, that perhaps other folks don't, or just ones that don't get talked about often. So we're calling it forgotten. It's not really forgotten. It's kind of a a clickbaity headline, I guess, but I guess it's a cool way to kind of spark some discussion. So let me briefly introduce the panel. So in the top left, David. He has 10 kids. He scored a maximum 1,600 on his SAT back in 1945, and he has a PhD in bicycle design. Welcome, David. Rob, with his 12 cats, he intentionally colors his hair gray, and his favorite book is Guitar for Dummies. So welcome. Glad to have you. Pat, it's been a hot minute. It's been a while. He's got the lettuce on his head there, and he's 20 minutes late for everything. He absolutely loves the New York Rangers, and when he watches Netflix, he just simply chills.
That's fair assessment.
Down in the bottom left corner, we have Eric. He's part owner of the Green Bay Packers. He chose the glasses that he's wearing because he saw how good they looked on me, and his favorite Rush song is Dog Years. And in the bottom right-hand corner, we have Dante. In a previous life, he was a divorce lawyer. He has a hot Asian wife, and he plays bass for Joe Satriani. So welcome.
That was good. That was good.
Of course, that's my fun little introduction for everybody. It's all mostly false. Pat is 20 minutes late for everything. I will say that much. But
yeah, I was going to say, where's a lie?
And two lies and a truth. Eric's removed his glasses. All right, let's get to it. And of course, Dante, I chose Joe Satriani because Joe Satriani more or less taught Steve Vai how to play guitar, and Dante's on tour with Steve Vai. So, all right, Dave, let's from the topping, no stopping. We're each going to go through three solos that we think are forgotten, undervalued, underappreciated, and tell us why. And guys, feel free to speak up and discuss at any point. Take it away.
Cool. My first one is 1975's "Making Memories" from Fly By Night. I just love the way that Alex starts just with the slide, goes right into it. While at that time they were beginning to tour by, people getting to sleep on suitcases in the back of the station wagon and whatnot. Nonetheless, Road Life's Not So Bad, and that solo just kind of captures, I think, just the memories, right? The making memories of touring, and it's just it's a peppy, happy solo. So I like that one. My second one is Twilight Zone, that solo at the end. I chose that because I've been a Rush fan since '76. I was 11 years old when I got introduced to this band, and it was a couple years later when some older cousins introduced me to a plant, that you could smoke. I haven't done that for a long time, but I would come home sometimes after school and put on my headphones and throw on 2112 on the turntable. And side two, when you get to Twilight Zone, that first note is just so high. And when you're so high and you hear that in the headphones, just absolutely magnificent. And then just the way that, runs out the song, it's a great solo. So that was my second pick. And then this one is not technically a song. It's a part of a song, The Fountain of Lamneth, but the solo at the end of Vaca's Plateau. It just, again, he had the protagonist had just left Panacea. His heart was heavy, but then, drawn to the goblet from the Cask of 43. And then that solo just runs out that piece again with a very happy note, kind of similar to Making Memories in that sense. It's just peppy, and it makes me happy to listen to it. And so those are mine.
Dude,
Good
those
stuff.
are such good picks. I just got to say that, wow, those are 3 excellent picks.
Thank you.
Done.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, that's really perfect.
I especially like the Twilight Zone pick because that's a solo that I've always kind of, it's one that kind of gets lost, and that's, of course, this exercise, and phenomenal ending solo,
Mhm.
which Alex has a lot of. I'm sure we'll probably get into some of them. So, Rob, perhaps you're going to mention one from Hold Your Fire?
No, oddly enough, actually, this is the only clean Rush shirt I had on today. So just they're all
The
in
only
line.
clean Rush shirt you had on today, so you had multiple
Yes.
Rush shirts on today that were dirty.
I took a few off, and this is the cleanest one. So
Okay.
so very much like David, I went early in terms of my picks. So the first one is Here Again, and cue to Eric, because on the Stick It Out episode, he mentioned, I think that was your song, Eric, I think. And the version from the Agora Ballroom is the one I checked out, December 16, 1974, Cleveland, Ohio. And it's like 9 minutes and change, really nice and bluesy. And for some reason, I went kind of in the bluesy direction. And of course, tomorrow will be it'll be a different styling from Alex, but I went with the early stuff, and that was a great version. I never heard the Agora Ballroom version of Here Again, so it was really cool. It was really cool to hear that. That's number one. Number two, I also went with The Caress of Steel, Fountain of Len-Meth, No One at the Bridge. Love that solo. Such a great solo. I just the way he plays it, the effect on the sound, just super tight. I love that solo. I always enjoyed that solo.
Billy
And
Alexander from Why Not nails that when they play that tune
yes.
so well on the tone and all. But yeah,
Oh, I love to see them play that live. I haven't checked them out yet, but yes, they do a great job of that. And my last pick is Lakeside Park. And I went with the Capitol Theater, December 10, 1976, All the World to Stage Tour. They were just playing so much back then. It was just, they tend to kind of twist and turn a little bit on that solo and kind of almost improv certain parts. So I like the freedom and the more sort of flexibility in the arrangement of the live version of that song. I was debating R40, but I definitely preferred the earlier rendition of the song with the solo. Just fabulous. So those are my 3 picks.
Every
you
bit
went
of that
like-
Agora Ballroom performance is fantastic, especially Here Again. Thank you, Rob.
Yes. Had to mention it.
You went like forgotten, like ones that perhaps some fans have never even heard of either because they're live and
Yeah.
they're not as easily accessible as some of the, I guess, later live concerts or exit stage live or things like that, right? So,
Yep.
Good stuff.
Absolutely.
Cool. Mysterious Pat in the dark.
Hello. First of all, I hope I try to put like the blur black background on. Ooh, I meant to say background. So I hope if you're seeing it like blurring my face, I apologize. I don't know why it's doing that. Probably like a lighting issue, or maybe Zoom just doesn't want to show my face.
No,
well,
dude, your lighting's fine. I wouldn't think.
Let's see if I could turn the brightness up on my screen. This is the best I can do. So, all right, let me get into it. When I was thinking of what solos to mention, my first thought was, like it has to be a forgotten solo. It can't just be a solo from a forgotten song that like no one cares. I tried to pick like some certain songs that like people like, they talked about, but I never heard anyone talk about the solo. So I hear people talking about Everyday Glory, great ending song to an album, just like a great message overall. I don't really hear anyone talking about how just melodic and fantastic the progression of that solo goes. It's probably one of my favorite solos, and I urge everyone to just give it a listen if they, don't really remember it or anything. But yeah, that's one of the best. Next, I
A
have
throwaway
Turn the
solo
Page.
for a throwaway song, right?
Yeah. Next, I have Turn the Page.
Inside joke.
For Turn the Page, it's people like the song Turn the Page. I don't hear people trashing the song or anything for that matter. But once again, like the solo, it's a solo that like many Alex solos kind of like jumps out at you. And I think this one just deserves the recognition that a bunch of other ones get. Um, and finally, I'm kind of like in the 90s to late 80s era, but this one I have Carve Away the Stone. Now, this one, it's a song that, yeah, people don't really talk about. But I think the solo in that song just kind of once again jumps out at you. Um, and it really is something that shouldn't be forgotten. And it kind of fits the criteria of what I was saying with the other ones, how it's just like very melodic and it's kind of surprising. It feels like the solo is like too good like for the song. Like sometimes even like when I listen to the song, I'm like, I'm just listening it just to get to that solo. So those are my 3 picks.
I'm angry, maybe angry, maybe not angry, because that was on my list. And that
Really?
of my 3 choices, that was the least likely
What
one I thought was going to get
What are the
talked
chances?
about.
Wow.
So I guess I'll pick another one while Eric's talking, and I'll say my piece on Carve Away the Stone right now. And I'll keep it short. When I hear that solo, I said this on season 1 of Stick It Out when I had that song Carve Away the Stone on my list. It's very swirly. It gets me the image I get in my head when I listen to the solo and Carve Away the Stone is the graphics that were in Windows Media Player when we were kids. Well, like the 4 of us were kids, right? So, like, do you guys remember like Windows Media Player would come up and it would give you all these like weird swirly freaking backgrounds and shit? That's what I get. That's what I see in my head when I listen to the solo and Carve Away the Stone. I don't know why. It feels like groovy and like just swirly. So that's what I have to say about Carver with the Stone. So I got some homework. Eric, go ahead.
All right. I had a tough time getting it down to just 3, but I will do just 3. My first one, I'm also going to go to Counterparts with Cut to the Chase. I feel like this song is one, or this solo is one that sounds totally different than so many, or really any other solo that Alex has done. To me, it sounds like something almost Eric Johnson would have written, with the flurries of notes up and down the neck, the arpeggios. It's got such a great tone to it with the delay. Really cool, really cool. Totally different than anything else he's done. My second one is also from Counterparts, so I guess it's the 3rd song from Counterparts, Cold Fire. And this is one I didn't really pick up on until the last few weeks, and I saw a few covers of this solo online, and the people that were playing the covers played it better than I can ever imagine playing that solo, but it didn't feel quite right. I'm like, why doesn't it feel quite right? I think it's because the rhythm is so weird in that solo. Like I think it's just 4/4, but the rhythm of the solo itself is just weird. The notes come out of nowhere, but you don't realize it when you're listening to it. It just sounds like a solo. And then when you try and recreate it, it's like, where does that note come in? It's just weird, and it sounds so good, and it's so hard to recreate. It's a really cool solo. So that's my number 2. My number 3 is going to be from the lovely, lovely Snakes and Arrows. It's The Way the Wind Blows. Great song with a great solo. It's really cool how he starts the solo off with the intro riff, and then he plays around with that a little bit. And then rather than going up the neck like you typically would in a solo, you climax as you go up the neck. He goes down on the neck, and he takes it to a totally different place with a totally different sound. It's really unexpected, and it brings it back to that last chorus in a really cool way. So I think The Way the Wind Blows is, again, another really different solo and a really cool solo.
I totally agree. It's probably one of the most unique solos that is in the catalog.
Great Counterparts picks too. I'm
Yeah.
glad you mentioned both of those, because those are I think 2 of his best ever. Like the tone, and he was just so locked in on that record for some reason. Like the solos were just so butter, and those are very good ones to pick. And I don't know, did they ever play either of those songs live?
They did Cold Fire live.
Okay.
It's a good old country western tune.
Yeah,
Um,
Yep.
I don't know if they did cut to the chase.
Okay.
they did not. No, just Cold Fire Counterparts tour. No cut to the chase ever,
Maybe Alex can do it live.
which is a shame because that's a solo that I feel like that's a shredding solo. That's a kind of forgotten solo. You don't hear that talked about with the La Villas and the Limelights and of the world, right? And yeah, I think those are all really good picks.
Thank you.
All right, so my three, I found a new one here that I think is a good one. I'll mention it last. I'll continue with the Snakes and Arrows. Eric passed the Snakes and Arrows torch, I guess, over to me, and the first three that came to mind. One was Carved with a Stone. I already talked about that, but the next two are of the three that came to mind to me first, and the first one is the Larger Bowl from Snakes and Arrows. Um, I'm looking at when I listen to Alex play, I'm not. I mean, I own a couple guitars. I rarely play them. David and I were just talking about this before the recording. I'm not. I don't fancy myself as a guitar player, so I don't know all the technical terms and all that. I'm listening for emotion. I'm listening for solos that fit the songs, and a solo that comes to mind in that regard is the Weapon. I hold the Weapon in super high regard. That's not on my list because I don't think that's forgotten at all. But the Larger Bowl, I think it fits the mood perfectly. It's structured. The whole song structured in the form of a pantoum, um, and and it's slow. It's slow-ish, right? It's kind of I've heard some people say it's like kind of an outcast the way Resist is kind of an outcast on Test for Echo. But the solo doesn't overshadow the rest of the song, right? It's not Alex isn't coming in and just absolutely shredding or trying to show off or whatever. He's showing off in a much more peaceful way, and it's fairly fast, but it doesn't come off as again, it doesn't come off as like he's shredding really. So
He's not really wanking out on it.
I was just about to say that he's not really wanking out on that solo. So uh, I'm glad you came in there and said that. So the second one is Good News First, also from Snakes and Arrows. The solo starts with a little bit of Neil's drumming. Again, no shredding and just another very emotional solo. I think these two songs in general um, I think these two songs in general are often forgotten about on this record. I think they're often overlooked, and therefore you often overlook the solos. So, kind of the opposite of what Pat was going for, right? So you were looking for songs that people don't overlook, but that they overlook the solos. I think both in this case. I think both those two Snakes and Arrows songs are overlooked, especially the Larger Bowl because people hate the way it's structured and they're like, "Yeah, this song sucks." It doesn't, and especially the solo for both of those tracks. Go listen to them. Now, my third is one that I've just pulled out of my ass here right now, and that's After Image from Grace Under Pressure. I think
Good one.
I think the big solo on this record is from Between the Wheels. I think that's the one that's often talked about as the best solo on this record. I never hear the solo of After Image talked about at all. I always hear, the lyrics and specifically the intro lyrics, suddenly you were gone from all the lives you left your mark upon. I always hear that talked about. I never hear the solo talked about. And again, emotional. It's a very dark song. It's a very dark record in general, but it's a very dark song, dealing with loss. And it really fits the mood. Again, a song that really fits the vibe of that song. And the solo at times and in parts it sounds slightly repetitive to me. But it works. And I think Alex really shines. And throughout the song, really, but especially in the solo, I think it's kind of an extended solo. It runs fairly long, but
It's a good example of how Alex combines notes within chords, in a solo.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, that's a good point. Yep.
Yeah, it's terrific.
All right, Dante, what do you got?
All right. Well, I'll just tell you guys that my criteria for a great guitar solo are two things. One, it's got to make me want to dance and sing, and the fast moments, for the melodic moments and the fast moments, they have to be like an explosion. They have to be a justified explosion that makes the previous dancing and singing and the dancing and singing melodies that will follow all justified. So with that as being my barometer, number one, no question, emotion detector. I think it's one of the best solos he ever did. And if you really listen to it, it's because I think there's just a few moments where he holds notes and does really small bends up and down. And when he chooses to like get a little higher, it comes at the perfect moment as the chords are kind of swelling too. So, there's something about that really is extremely emotional, and it suits the song because, that's the title, right? And it's a really deep song about like understanding, our emotional states and that kind of thing and our place in the world. And that it just, the melodies, man, they're just out of control for me. So I'd say that one, number one. Number two, The Speed of Love. It's not really a solo. It's kind of borderline because it's so short. But to me, I would call it a solo because I always think of it as a solo. But it's pure melody. It's short, and the way it's done is it still creates the emotional explosion of a super shreddy solo like Chemistry, which I've talked about before, as I'd say my number one Rush solo ever. It still creates that like cascading of emotions. It justifies there being a solo, but the way it's done is it's so open and soaring melodic, just like 4 or 5 notes that are just so I can't not sing it. It's so good, man. It's so good. And I love that song. I think it's just an underrated song in general. And I have to say something, Counterparts, because it's one of the best Rush albums. Facts. As evidenced by all these forgotten souls we're putting. The third one, I have a couple, but I'm gonna go early. I'm gonna go to The Necromancer. There's this outro solo that is like straight Pete Townsend. Like, it totally sounds like it could have been like a Who song section, like just this little section at the end. And it's a super bright, happy moment on what is otherwise a really dark record that admittedly I haven't listened to nearly as much as other Rush albums, but that solo stuck out. Really, it stands out to me because I think, again, the context. For me, great solos are all about the context and when you take them, and to come in with that sort of like really happy, upbeat, fast kind of thing in that record, I thought it was really, really cool. And because it's by definition has to be forgotten, because apparently that album, if you know the story of the band, which we all do, is like their Down the Tubes tour album, right? So when I think forgotten, I had to go look there first. So those are my picks.
Outstanding picks.
So that's 4 from Counterparts.
Let's see. All right, we've got Making Memories, The Twilight Zone, Bacchus Plateau, Here Again, No One at the Bridge, Lakeside Park, Everyday Glory, Turn the Page, Carve Away the Stone, Cut to the Chase, Cold Fire, The Way the Wind Blows. Mine were The Larger Ball, Good News First, and After Image, and Emotion Detector, The Speed of Love, and The Necromancer.
So 4 from Caress of Steel.
4 from Counterparts. Yep.
Counterparts is a top 5 Rush album. Debate me all night on that, I won't budge. That's a top 5 Rush album.
Yep. I would agree. I would die on that hill as well. Yeah, I would agree. All right, so we have a little bit of time here left over. So why don't we kind of have some open discourse? And I've been taking some notes of solos that weren't mentioned that I think could have been mentioned, or maybe I kind of expected to be mentioned tonight and weren't, just for the viewer to, kind of be like, oh yeah, I'm glad they mentioned that type of thing. So the first one that came to mind was Presto.
Mine. Yeah.
it was never done live up until the Time Machine tour, and seeing Alex break that out live killed it. You don't often hear Presto get, as a whole, the record get talked about as often as it probably should. And I think the title track has a phenomenal solo. Lock and Key, I'm surprised didn't get mentioned. That's a shredding solo.
Yes.
That's that one's probably overshadowed by solos like on Mission. Or Pat mentioned, I think was it Pat mentioned? Yeah, Turn the Page.
Yeah.
It's
debating whether to do Lock and Key or Turn the Page because I both feel like they were underrated, but that goes to show.
Open Secrets is on that record too. Great solo. Another one that we talked about fairly recently, Available Light on a roundtable. But I don't know how forgotten that solo is. I mean, I feel like that is like, one of the deepest of deep cuts that people bring up when they mention deep cuts, Rush. So, sticking with counterparts, two more that came to mind were Animate and Double Agent. And Alien Shore. Actually, David and I were talking about this earlier. Alien Shore as well. There's a lot of Alex work on counterparts that where he shines, and of course, it was their return to their nuts and bolts, and you get a lot of Alex. But I think let's start with Animate there.
I was gonna put it, but I feel like there's no way you could call that one forgotten.
See, I could see that one. I could see that solo as forgotten to the point that Pat made about the song being a popular one, but the solo being forgotten. And that's another one that almost was my third one here. That after Pat said "Carve Away the Stone" for me, but I feel like the solo in Animate is just so emotional. Alex just gets so invested in it. And again, it's not a shredding solo. It just perfectly fits the song. Double Agent and Alien Shore as well. Two definitely very creative solos, I would say. I'd love to hear I'm talking a lot here at the end. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on some of these I've mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, one I went really early with mine, but a very late one is when you think of Clockwork Angels. I don't know about you guys, but I think a not forgotten solo would be The Garden. That was one of the most emotional solos that Alex did since Limelight. But Caravan was such a great solo to me. It was I think Taylor Hawkins, may rest in peace, talked about at the Rock Hall melodic, chaotic solos, and I think Caravan is precisely chaotic, well, being very melodic. And and then Lessons, going back to '76, the only song Alex wrote the lyrics for, and after Neil joined the band, that's another great outro solo. It's just pure rock and roll, just really, really great. And Xanadu, I'm a huge fan of that solo at the end of Xanadu.
Definitely.
Is that a forgotten solo though?
Well,
is that solo forgotten?
Not by anybody here, I suppose.
Well, could you make the argument that Pat made about the solo in Xanadu? Is the song as a whole overshadowing the solo? I don't know.
Yeah, it's at the end. Maybe not, but I don't know. It's just nobody talks about it. I haven't heard really anybody talk about, oh wow, that solo Alex does at the end of Xanadu. The opening stuff that he does, when the guitar first starts coming in, right before it gets heavy, people talk about that. But really, I haven't heard that much love given to that outro solo.
Yeah, I think when Alex writes solos, it's like what he writes is so perfect for the song. We mentioned this already, that I think you forget the solo for that reason, because it really is integral to the song. It does like you said, it's not flashy, it's not shreddy, it just fits, and you can't really picture anything else being in there. But it's so wrapped around the song that it just, I think that's probably one of the reasons why people forget it. Like sometimes you hear these standout moments, like, oh, he was just completely shredding down the neck, it's amazing, but he just fit. Even Nick Raskulinecz said this. He writes the perfect part. It's like the perfect moment. It's just, I think that's one reason why it's forgotten. Like I think Pat just mentioned that before too.
That's a great point. When getting interviewed with Dan Rather, he talked about how they think of themselves as the world's smallest symphony orchestra. So its parts don't necessarily stand out, but it's how they come together. When I think of that, when at the end of Xanadu, you're not just hearing Alex, you're hearing Neil on the tubular bells again, and all of that blending together. Excellent point, Rob.
Also, the tempo like slows down. So when he starts on that big open E to the F sharp, and he kind of like it almost sounds like he is using a whammy bar to pull up, which, by the way, that didn't exist then. That hadn't been invented yet. So it's like when you put it into context of that, like, holy shit, like if you were sitting there listening to that, looking at your guitar and you hear, you're like, how do you do that?
The same thing at the end of Grand Finale in 2112, that F sharp and E.
Yeah. Which you can pull the string down past the nut, but still, like that, I don't know, man. There's something about that with the tempo change. I was thinking Xanadu as well, but I feel like it might be too popular. But you make a good argument that people don't really talk about that one the way they talk about La Villa,
Right. Yeah.
To Rob's point, Alex just playing the perfect part. Could that be why Alex is forgotten, to use the title of this episode, forgotten in a lot of your top 10, top 20, top 100 lists of guitar players? Obviously, music is all subjective, and a lot of these lists are just bullshit. But he's often forgotten in those. And I think I've always thought it was because he was probably overshadowed by Geddy and Neil, and they're always in all your top 10 lists. And Alex is just, the other guy in Rush to a lot of these music critics, not to us, obviously, but to a lot of these music critics. Could that be a contributing factor? Because he's not trying to be flashy. He's trying to fit the songs, and he's trying to be Rush and not be this freaking guitar god, right?
Well, you said it right there when you say he's not trying to be flashy. And of course, when Rush really got big after Moving Pictures, that was the 80s. So it was Eddie Van Halen. Michael Anthony, I think, once said that, who can compete with that? As far as him getting kind of recognition in the band. And so back then with, glam rock and, big hair and everything, it was about how fast can you play the solo? And Alex didn't do that. He didn't play that way. He could, he can play as fast as anybody and shred, as well as anybody. But
C cut to the chase, for an example.
Yeah.
Or Free Will or Analog.
Yep.
So Free Will. Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes. So at that particular time, his style of playing guitar wasn't the thing that hit the limelight. So he's just not noticed. And Geddy said once in an interview that I heard that he thinks Alex is probably the most underrated guitar player, of that time. And I think, no bias.
Yeah.
Absolutely, objectively.
And it's probably so easy to pick out how different the things that Geddy and Neil do compared to other drummers and to other bassists, but you had to pay just a little bit more attention to what Alex is doing to really get it most of the time, and that's probably what drives that.
Yeah.
A big part of it too has nothing to do with music and guitar playing. As much as we would like to think that the world is purely based on the merit of your music, it is not. There are so many other things in music that people pay attention to. And I think one of the things with Rush is that because they were never understood by the mainstream media, right? It took so long for that to really start to happen, and it arguably never happened. I think people just were unwilling to even indulge that as a possibility of, putting him on a certain list, because it's when you go about as an artist doing something really purely for the sake of the art, like these guys were just super pure, writing lyrics in their most famous album about how screwed up the record industry is. When you do something that pure,
art is expression, not as market campaigns.
You will be misunderstood, even though what you're saying is so pure and genuine. You will be misunderstood by a lot of people in the world, mainstream or otherwise. And when that happens, it creates an association for that artist that they can't ever get away from, or being misunderstood. And so you can't call them the greatest guitar player on the list because they're too quirky, or they're too weird, or they're too whatever. And that's the label that has been generated for them, because they're different and because they're unique and pure in a world of, not unique and pure people. In music. It's hard to find that. And especially when you look at people who, I mean, first of all, nowadays you have to ask, does a musician even write their own songs? When you're, not as a criticism, but in order to understand who they are, it's a very fair question to say, oh, this is a new musician. Oh, okay. Do they write their own songs? I mean, can you imagine like a world in which every musician wrote their own songs? There would be a way fewer musicians out there in this popular landscape that there are, because it is so hard. And to not only do it well, but do it with genuine feelings about the world, the way these guys did it, it just puts you into a different box.
And to repeat it for 40 years.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We can wrap there. I'm sure we could talk for hours about this and name, 20 more solos each. Ceiling Unlimited and Grand Designs come to mind. Two other ones that I forgot to mention, but I'll stop there and we'll leave it open for comments. Are there any that we missed in the comments? Let us know if there's any solos that you think are forgotten solos, not talked about enough, or as some of Alex's best, or or comment on some of the points that we made, that Rob made, that Pat made. Anything. Leave a comment. Let us know a solo or three solos or whatever that you think are forgotten or overlooked, or I feel like the term underrated is thrown around quite a bit on the Rush subreddit and the Facebook groups and all that. So we kind of try to avoid using that word with this episode. But anyways, we will see you next week. We got a couple fun ones coming up before we dive back into Roll the Bones song discussions. So we'll wrap with that. Thanks, guys. Take care. David, why don't you go ahead and play us a forgotten Alex solo on?
I was going to do After Image, but then I realized
with your kid gloves there.
With my kid gloves, with my little replica ES355, which you can get on Rush Backstage Club, but the strings need to be changed. They're not staying in tune, so we'll have to wait for another episode for me to
play some slide.
Do that.
Play some slide, man.
Oh yeah, do the Making Memories solo, like I said.
Yeah, wank out on that little mini.
Yeah, just there. Wank out. Wank out.
Wank out. Wank out.